Okay. I want to do this now while it's still fresh in your mind. This is Hebrews 6:12, at least a part of it here in the Greek. From the geneste mimitai, that you may become, Genesis, the word gene, to become, that you may become. I had a problem with this, and I've always had a problem with this word because of our English word. The Greek word mimitai is where we get our English word for imitator or mimicry. And I remember teaching on this in another book and grappling with this because it's not, people, it's kind of funny. People will say they understand our language, but they only understand it through the eyes of a native speaker. For a person like myself, I'm reading the Greek and thinking, wow, I can see how we would capture erroneous ideas of something. So this is why I picked up the Hebrew of this text, because the Greek says mimitai, which the King James is translating as followers, which is a good word if you're not looking at the Greek. But in the Hebrew, we have, you'll probably recognize this, we have here, would be the same word you find here in the root for Jacob, Yaakov, Be'Yakovot, on the heels of, or in the steps of. And I kind of like that better, on the heels of. Even they might say, well, that's, or followers, but mimitai, I don't want to be mimicking somebody. If I'm a genuine article through Christ, then Christ is leading me, and I'm not going to try and imitate Christ. I'll let Thomas the Kempis. I'm going to be a follower. I'm in the footsteps. So I like the Hebrew word, the heels of. Let's go back to the Greek for a minute. We have de, ton, dia, of one of those, or through, of one of those, through. Let's put it here, of one. I'm putting this like this, those, through. Here we have the noun form, pisteos, the noun form in the genitive. Noun, genitive, feminine, singular. Being a noun, which in many ways we always come to this disadvantage as English speakers, because faith as a noun, and in this particular case, it functions more like a verbal noun than it does as a straight noun. The same thing is going to be true of makrothemias, of long-suffering, and long-suffering, which is also a genitive. Should be the same thing. Faith and long-suffering as verbal nouns. And here we have, this is of interest. If you're interested in this, why I made notes for myself on this verse, because this Greek word for to inherit is a verb. It's also a participle, and it is present. It is active, genitive, masculine, and plural. Now, why I said you can't just translate this and of the promises, although this does not make it plural. I'm doing this as if it was promises, ES in English. What you come up with. So, for example, the King James says, followers of them who through faith and, King James, patience, long-suffering, inherit the promises. And that's why I qualified that by saying it's not, because I had to write these down to be clear, it's not those who have inherited, as we see, because it's a participle, but it's present. So it's still ongoing. So it's not those who have inherited as a past, nor is it just who shall inherit, open-ended, because it is from the time that it started and its effects keep going because it's present. That means it's continuous. Who are inheriting, because that would leave off the genitival force of it. It must be of. We've got the genitive here, genitive of the activities to inherit. But who are, and this is why I said with the participle force, but it is active, who are inheritors of the promises. So subtle things sometimes in translation. Let me give you an idea in my Bible here, my polyglot. I took the Sahidic and the Bohairic and put them side by side. And you would think they would be close, but imagine if you were only reading one and not the other. So the Sahidic would read that you should not be, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong, I'm reading from the beginning, that you should not be slothful, that you should not become daunted, but liken yourself to those who will inherit the promises through their faith and long suffering. That's not too bad. The Bohairic does something different, that ye be not weak, but that ye be like them that inherited the promises, inherited the promises through their faith and long suffering, making it a terminus that is no longer applicable to us. The imitation part or the following part, that we be like them, but they've already inherited, and therefore the terminus ended with them. We should just be like them. There's no benefits, which is an erroneous, translation. So one of the reasons why I kept camping on this, I used this last week. I looked at it again, and I don't think we're done using it as a launching pad. But if I understand this right, it's saying something that should be a staple for us, that faith and long suffering are part of, if you want this thing called resurrected life, this is part of it, faith and long suffering. Do you think that would make a good title of a book? How to Inherit the Kingdom, Faith and Long Suffering. No, they never sell. You mean I have to actually think and wrestle by faith to obtain through long suffering? Yep. No thanks. Anyway, well, let me just show you quickly why the Hebrew I thought was of interest. You'll see sometimes funny things that come out. Take a look at this. So we have in the Greek, we have through faith, right? And you can see here we have the amen word. You can see it, right? See the amen word right here. So asher, and then we've got this bet participle, and very clearly plural suffix. And we have here, we'll put in brackets as one word, long suffering or long sorrow, inherit but this is what tickled me. I thought this is kind of interesting. Remember, this is a Hebrew New Testament. But look how they translated the word promises. Batach. Now, you remember the three words we have, right? Chasa, to run, batach, to lean, and amen, right? So it's kind of interesting that what is being used, what is being used for promises is the word at its root of batach. It's kind of interesting because that's what we sing, standing on or leaning on the promises of God, and there it is right there, straight from the Greek into the Hebrew, that an interesting use of that word, because if you were trying to look up from the Hebrew, if you were doing a reverse lookup, remember we're dealing with a New Testament text, so if you're wanting to see how the word promise would be used in the Hebrew, you might have to turn to a word like we saw today, out of the New Testament, like oath or swear, or the word of the Lord, which was taken as a promise. The word of the Lord, amer or devar, versus this word. So it's kind of interesting the way this is used. But when I saw this, I thought, for those people who are just wanting something extra, promise is something you can lean on. That's kind of a mnemonic for how this was translated for me. A promise is something you batachan. You have run to it, now you lean on it. It's stable, it'll hold you. I also like the whole translation of this passage is kind of neat. So now for you people who are studying Hebrew, you also see that we've got plenty of Old Testament studies to exhaust, but if we should ever run out of material in the Old Testament, we've got plenty of translations from the New as well. Anyway, it's just something to noodle around for those of you who are wanting to see some of the translations. For me, what it does is each time I open up and I do a translation, any verse, even sometimes when I'm not using in the message, when I'm not doing a translation, I'm not using it as part of the message, I'll still translate it. I'll look up the diversity of translations to see if I spot any abnormities or anomalies, and then go back to check the translation from our manuscripts. Here, the only thing that caught my attention for verse 12 was that it's ongoing for us as well. We are following in the footsteps, if you will. The 11th chapter of Hebrews kind of gives the snapshot of that. Following in the footsteps of those who through faithing action, because it's a verbal noun in the force, and long-suffering, they have and we will too obtain the precious promises, as Peter calls them. Now, taking your reservations and your commitments, get on the telephone.